Well, my guest's name is Joe Ingram, and he's a renowned sales expert and consultant with over 30 years of experience in the field. He's got an impressive track record of success, and Joe has become a sought-after authority in the automotive industry and beyond. He's really known as the sales genius. And we had a really interesting discussion, and one thing that we talked about is leadership is going the wrong direction. One thing he talked about was that if you are not leading yourself, then you will be led by others. We also talked about Simon Sinek and what is the why. We had a rich discussion. So a great guy, great guest, awesome discussion. Sit back and enjoy the interview.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
Welcome to another wonderful episode of the Leadership is Changing podcast. Great to have you here with us. I have a great guest with me. His name is Joe Ingram. Joe, a massive welcome to you.
Thank you very much. I am grateful to be here because leadership is something that needs to be discussed, taught, and improved on throughout the world.
You mean you're not born as a leader?
I believe some people's attitudes are, but not necessarily them.
Yeah. Oh, that's actually a good way of putting it. Yeah, very good. Hey, look, I always ask this question with the people I interview around the world. Whereabouts are you around the world today?
I am in Orange County, California, in the United States.
Excellent. Well, welcome. And so one of the things I always start off with is for you to share a little bit more about your background. So tell us what you've done, what you do today, and just to help the listeners understand who Joe is.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm an electrical engineer that ended up as a sales trainer for very large companies. So you can tell they go hand in hand, electrical engineering and sales. But I got into electrical engineering because I didn't have a direction after I got out of high school. And my mom said, why don't you go learn how to put together all those electronic components that you took apart throughout your living in this house? And then not knowing that electrical engineering had nothing to do with that, but I ended up going through and doing it. So if you're not leading yourself, someone will lead you, and it's not the best part. But I've gone through electrical engineering. I will tell you that I ended up becoming a leader in the company after I graduated. That scooped me up while I was there and forced into it early on. But I did electrical engineering, did criminal defense, but I worked in sales capacity and customer support, then went into the automotive industry. Since then, I have expanded into training companies on leadership, attitude, mindset, and overall sales increases with profitability.
So you did sales and criminal defense. Were you looking out there to try and sell to criminals? How does that work?
We were selling the outcome of their court case. So the owner of the law firm had built a law firm and advertised, and people would call in. So I ran the inside call center that would take the phone call, gather the information, and schedule the appointment for the outside sales team to go meet with the family of those people that were incarcerated and what have you. So we did that, and it took us 90 days to triple their income. And then we ran it for 2 years and became one of the largest in the nation at what we were doing.
Excellent. Now, I also understand you have a podcast. I think the title of the podcast is Sales Geniuses. Is that the name of it?
Yeah, Sales Genius. So is the podcast title. But yeah, that's where I talk with people about sales, marketing, branding, attitude, and mindset. And I bring in guest speakers all the time because it started out as a private group for me on Facebook with people. And then everybody gets tired of listening to the same person over and over again. So I started bringing in guest trainers. And then I said, I have all this content from all these people, and I'm going live and putting it out on YouTube, but why am I not making it available for people on a podcast? And then transferred all my episodes up there. But I think we're up at episode 158 at the time of this taping.
Awesome. Well done. Attitude, mindset. Let's talk about it from a leadership perspective. How important is attitude, and mindset?
So I believe mindset is what determines whether or not how high you can go to expect for your team. Like if you believe you are a number one achieving individual, that's one of the first steps in your own mindset to see. Because we tend to, if you look at people, leaders go in, and let's say a leader walks in with a 9 out of 10 mindset. Okay. You're not going to find a bunch of people that walk in with a 9 out of 10. But that's actually the cap of the team, meaning that most people will only get to a 7 or 8 so they can play around your level, but they don't typically try to exceed the level of the leader that's there. So it's always crucial that the mindset of the leader be as high as possible and, as ethical as possible.
And that mindset of the leader being high as possible, in other words, if the leader's mindset is a 7 or an 8, isn't that really the lid on the organization, since that the organization really can't go above it if the leader is at a 7 or an 8?
Oh, absolutely. It's the ceiling. It's the concept of A player, B player, C player, right? An A player can always hire another A player because they're not afraid of that person. But a B player will never hire another B player, or especially not an A player. So if your mindset and your drive and determination, right, which is everything comes from that mindset, is at a 10, you're not scared of an 8, 9, 10 because you're already there at the maximum possible. But if you are a 7, you are intimidated even to interview an 8, and you will unconsciously sabotage yourself or them in the interview so that they don't come in and make you look bad. It's called self-preservation.
Yeah. Or ego, or come on. It's just like, because
in the sales world, I say ego is edging gross out.
right, nice,
Right? You let gross leave the deal.
yeah.
Because you're too busy trying to be you.
Well, that's right. I think people are getting in their own way, and that's the same thing with what you just shared about interviewing people, bringing people onto the team. I think a smart leader, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. A smart leader is really one leader who hires better people than themselves, hires people who are going to go really well to different levels, not get intimidated by them. What are your thoughts on that?
100%, right? It's one of those situations where I don't believe in the way my mindset's set up. I have strengths and I have abilities. If somebody has a strength the same as mine, I'm not intimidated by it. I still think iron sharpens iron. But if somebody has a skill set that is one of my weaknesses, I want to hire them right away. I don't even have to second guess it because I know we need to get to that fully rounded and fully deliverable for the customer is going to be that way. So if I'm great at leading the team and conducting sales, but the actual mundane job of inputting into the system, pushing it through our CRM, getting them set up for an onboarding call and all those other things, if I can't stand doing that and I find someone who is, right, then I look and say, that's going to benefit my team. That's going to benefit the company because that person enjoys doing the parts that I don't like doing.
Yeah.
Where a lot of times you'll see leaders hire a bunch of people like themselves, but less than. And so that leaves you with things that fall through the cracks and an organization that's ultimately doomed.
That's it, listeners. There you go. Don't hire people like yourself. It's really important what Joe's saying is that actually you make sure you bring in people who are not like you. So, and I really like what you said before there, Joe, was the fact that you're fully rounded as an organization, that you're closing the loop, that you're covering all the weaknesses, all the strengths, and making sure that we're all good and we're all spot on as well. Yeah, cool. Now, Joe, fantastic what you're sharing. How did you actually get into leadership yourself?
So when I was 19, I got picked up by a company. It was an aerospace company while I was still in college. Got picked up on an internship and going through. And by the time I got to 20 years old, I was a full-time employee for them as I finished schooling. And with that, I got thrusted into management really quickly. The reason I got into leadership was I took over someone's position that had convinced the company that it would take them to do a certain task, that it would take them hours to do it. So they had built almost a year-long backlog of work for themselves. Well, they were going to college as well, and the company was going to pay for college. So they intentionally slowed down. They intentionally worked night shift so that there was no one there. And they were doing all their homework and messing around and doing just a slow production piece all the way through. And so when that person got their degree and moved on, I came in and I just, as a single performer leading myself, pushed out a year-long backlog in about 3 months. And so everybody was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So I'm sitting down just working because that's what I knew what to do. But I had built relationships with everybody in the team on how to get things done faster. So an opportunity came up to become a senior leader of 3 technicians. Then it became the department. By the time I was 22, I was responsible for multi-million dollars worth of government contracts, about 40 people working 24/7, 7 days a week to meet demand and deadline. So it was thrust upon me early on, but I walked the walk before I had to talk it.
Okay, good. That's excellent. And sometimes that's what happens is that it gets thrust upon us, and they go, good luck, see you later, see you in 12 months' time in your performance review. Hope you swim rather than sink. And that's what tends to happen. So did you actually have any formal, did the organization give you any training around leadership as well, even though you were thrown into the deep end?
No, I didn't. I had to seek it outside of my employer to go through, but that's just because I knew I was in over my head.
Yeah.
And so while you're trying to swim, what are you looking for? So at least a rock or a branch to hold on to. And that's what I was doing, was going in and saying, please, let me get some kind of information to go on. Now, again, I'm older, so that was at the time of cassette tapes and driving to work, listening to cassette tapes and, finding those leaders that resonated with me.
Yeah, for those listeners who don't understand, the little cassette tape is a little plastic thing that was about a rectangle size, and we put it in, and instead of being like a CD or DVD or a digital kind of format, we would listen to things. Joe, I don't know about you, but
You had to rewind it. It was the worst kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah. We were somewhere recently and somebody was taking a photo and they weren't sure how things were going. They're using a phone. I says, you probably need to wind it on to take another photo. And they were like, they weren't really tech savvy, and so I was a bit mean. But the other thing too, I was talking to somebody I was coaching recently, and I was talking about the fact that sometimes we are not ready for something, or we're not at that space or that position to take it on. And I gave the example of listening to a cassette tape or listening to a CD or some MP3 kind of thing, and even a podcast. Sometimes you might listen to it once, twice, 3 times, and then you might listen to it 6 months down the track. I would actually take the cassette tape out and go, hey, is this the same one? And it was the same cassette tape. It was just I was hearing brand new stuff. And it was like, why?
Absolutely.
And it was just because I wasn't ready at the time that I initially listened to it. But now I had grown, I was listening to it again. Did you experience that yourself as well?
100%. So what I used to do is I would get a cassette tape that lasts about an hour. And so I would take that cassette tape, and my drive to work was an hour. And so I did a tape of the week kind of thing. And so what I would do is the whole week I would drive and listen to this same tape back and forth, because repetition is key, right? In order for you to learn the skill. And so I would go back and forth. And then I would then cycle it to 3 months later. And so at that time I had a giant cassette case that was in my car with me. And so I would move it to 3 months down the line. And again, the growth you experience is whatever level you're at is what you can listen to. And so something that's at a level higher than you've grown to yet is on the tape, but you can't hear it because it doesn't resonate with you at that point. You're listening to, on the scale of 1 to 10, if you're a 4, you can't hear the 5 through 10 that's on there. So as you level up, and you don't know you leveled up until you go check it again. It's the same thing with reading books, right? Yep. It's the same thing with watching movies. You go in and go, oh, I see that now. Like I always laugh and say, do you know how many kids realized why their parents were laughing at the Shrek movies? Was because the comedy was literally written for the adult, and the kids just thought it was funny because of the slapstick stuff. Then they go later and they're like, hey, that was an innuendo. What was that? Oh my goodness, that's what that meant? And so It's the same with learning.
Yeah, very much so. I'm glad you see what you just shared there, because I think for the listeners who are listening to this episode, it's not just a one-ear listen. I think you should go back. I think there'll be certain episodes that you may resonate with, but there'll be others that you may not. But I would encourage you to go back and listen to those ones again later on, because that's when you will
Absolutely.
probably resonate with it, as just based on what Joe was saying. You probably aren't ready to listen to some of that or hear some of it, and then you go back later on and it's amazing. Same with books, as you said, and other things too. Joe, this person could be from history or or could be alive. Now, who's your favorite leader and why?
So I stick with the guys that are around now, right? My overall goal is, because things are always changing, then I want to stay up to date with what's there. But one of the ones that resonates the most with me is Simon Sinek. Okay. And so, because he and I have a similar approach, but it's more of what is the why behind what we're doing. And I always believe that if I'm going to lead a team, it's not just about setting the goal. It's about explaining why the goal is there, why we want to accomplish it, and what would it mean for each participant to hit. Where a lot of times leaders come in and they just sit down and go, the goal is X amount of dollars, and it doesn't relate to anybody else other than that's something you said. And so if you look at it, and then again, I think a lot of companies crumble because leadership starts at the top and they're dependent on all the mid-level managers that get put in place to filter it down. And I think that's, to me, I'd rather just say, let the visionary give the vision, let the managers and the integrators put it all together for you. But his ability to articulate a complex idea that's relatable and impactful, right? That to me is what makes the connection so deep with what he says, how he says it. And that's ultimately what I look for as well.
Yeah, I think the relatable and impactful is very important, because a lot of people, as you say, I just call them talking heads up front, really, Joe. They're up there, they're saying
Yeah.
things. Once again, we don't get it. We're not hearing it. We may not be at their right level that they're pitching it at, but they also need to make it relevant, relatable for us. And then, so then we understand it. The why is big. It's the understanding the vision, the picture, the big picture, and so forth. But then I noticed you actually used another word. You went then into the what we're going to do, right? So
Right.
which is really quite interesting. So the thing is, it's the why and the what. But if you don't make it relatable to people, they're going to go, huh? That's why I think what you just said as well is that people don't actually always understand where an organization's going. I think that people
Right.
do the strategy, but it's the strategy's being done to them and it gets pushed down their throat. And the CEO or someone up front goes, yeah, go out there and do it. Everyone goes, what? And they don't really get it at all, right? So it's
Exactly.
definitely what you're saying there for sure. Yeah. So Simon Sinek, have you met Simon personally?
I have not.
All right.
DM'd a couple times, but I don't know if it's somebody on his team or him.
It was
So
probably me responding for him on behalf of him.
I
No,
got
it
it.
wasn't.
Yes.
Hey,
I recognize the accent and the typing.
probably, yeah.
Yes.
Hey, question would be for you. The question I've got for you is that if you and Simon Sinek were sitting on a park bench somewhere having a cup of coffee, would there be one question you would love to ask him?
So to me, right, and I would stick with the why because that's where he's going. But to me, when I sit down with them and say, okay, how should I, as a leader, right, balance the need to be technologically at or above my competition and still remain with the why intact? Because again, what's the buzzword everyone talks about now is AI. So I would be sitting down going, Simon, how do you balance implementing AI? How do we balance AI to understand the why? How do we get that so that the purpose that drives the organization remains intact and can still resonate with the team while you're saying part of you have to go because I can do it more efficiently and profitably with less people.
Yeah. What's really interesting is in this podcast itself, been going for almost 4 years now. When we launched it, it was in the midst of the beginning of the pandemic, right? So everyone was like, and the
Right.
words we keep hearing in the interviews were ambiguity, pivot, adapt, and things like that. And then later on,
Oh, pivot was so overplayed.
it was overplayed, and it was the buzzword, right? And so every time I said
Yep.
it, I was dry reaching. I heard that word, right? But one was the pivot, and then later on, we started to talk about actually transitioning out of that, going into the space or the time of actually going from the pandemic back into the real world again, and then bringing people back into the office. Then later on, we were talking about financial stuff and how that was affecting us, and now we're talking about AI all the time, the technology, and It just seems to keep going all the time. So there's always that change. Talking about
Right.
change, the title of this show is called Leadership is Changing. When I say that title or that statement, what does that mean for Joe?
I believe leadership is heading in the wrong direction from what I understand and what I've seen in companies that I go into. Leadership has come more of all inclusive and based on a sense of fragility as opposed to being on actual results, and it's more feelings. And I know people are going to go, no, well, you need to respect people and you need to take their feelings into consideration. And I'm like, yes, I know. We do need to do that. But at the bottom, at the end of the road, what do we have to have? We have to have a profitable company. And in leadership, I think so many people nowadays have been muzzled. And the answer is don't tell them like it is, right? You have to find a way to politely allow them to catch up to the fact that they're not meeting the goals or the criteria, right? Leading a team of A players that know what they're supposed to do and get to where they're going, there isn't a lot of, other than a high five, there's not a lot of leadership that's required because I'm going to go show you what you need to invest in. They're going to go like, yes, we want to be part of this. Do you guys want this training? Should we do this? It's the underperformers that we're all trying to coddle and say, I know you haven't hit the goal yet, but yet I so want to say, we need to let you go. And the answer is it's going to come up with unprotected class is the reason why we are going to go and say, you can't tell people that they are failing to hit it. One of the things like in school, I had to attend when I was putting a company together, we had to have an attorney come in and talk to us about bullying. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? This is work. And they're like, I go, this is a company. And they're like, yes, I know. But bullying has been introduced into the school system. And that word is going to carry to the workplace because of all that. But the second you say, you haven't achieved your performance goals, the answer is you're bullying me. Let's go have a conversation with human resources. Let's go find this. And the answer is no, it's not. It's literally what's expected versus what is the result. And is it meeting it there? And I believe we're completely cutting the legs out of leaders because they can't have that conversation anymore without it being labeled as an attack.
Yeah, can't or actually afraid of having it nowadays too, as you said. Yeah. So, well,
of course.
Yeah.
Watch some other manager get totally cut off at the knees, and you're like, yes, we don't do that. And now we have a bunch of teams of mediocrity instead of high performance excelling teams.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next. But I think the thing is, it's a bit like taking an analogy of the Olympic Games, right? There's no longer gold, silver, or bronze medals. You're all going to get a medal first, right? So that's like that analogy. Or the other side is, I don't know about you, but for me, it's almost like the bar of performance of those high performers is being lowered to meet the lower ones. And the lower performers aren't bad people. They may not be at that level yet. They've still got to grow yet. They've still got things to do. So it's almost like we're lowering the higher performers down to meet the others to fit in. And it's like, So then does that mean that mediocrity, as you talked about, starts to happen? Does it mean that organizations' performance, their ability to grow as an organization, the sales, everything like that, how does that affect it? The other thing too, Joe, is sales versus delivery. There's always that sort of in between the two, right? And so then if sales are out there selling and delivery is not delivering well, then it's not a good thing because we won't be able to sell more again. We won't have customers who are referenceable. It's going to be difficult. So there's all that sort of comes into that kind of mindset / kind of scenario that you've just been talking about.
Well, I think the biggest thing is, right, like I've had somebody that I recruited from another job. And when I was listening to that person and I watched that person and their mannerisms, it's like, wow, this is somebody I need on my team to work for me. So stole them away from that company, coming in, and it's a completely different industry. Invested a lot in, taught, tripled their income, but they were completely miserable because it wasn't that first industry. And so I looked at it and I ended up having to terminate this person. And they went back to their first industry. And when I ran across them again, they were excited, bubbly, and doing it. And I always think, I have to be cognizant of the individuals that I'm hiring, bringing into the team to find out what it is that matters most to them so that I can custom tailor what we're doing to show that's how the outcome they're going to get it, or let them go. But if we're afraid to terminate somebody, if we're afraid of counseling somebody because of fear of the attack back on me, then I'm actually not doing a service for that person who's going to come in and coast, right, through the next 10 years of their life before they realize this is not a job they wanted. This is nothing that fulfills them. And it hurts them long term and hurts the company short term until we can get past that point of let's be managers. Let's be the leader, right? Because we can manage something, but leading means you're taking an interest and you're helping to guide and push whatever you're managing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing that's sometimes missing is it's how you talked before about the why. If the leader is not explaining the why and what's going on, that's where people don't get it. And that's when they start to think, oh, what are you doing to me? And it's that what piece, right? But it's not just that, it's how we're saying it too is really quite key. And I think some leaders are not doing themselves any favors either on the other side, right? Which is they actually need to be a little bit smarter about how they do things. And I think they always hide behind, I don't have time. And I'm like, yeah, you do. You just need to be a little bit smarter in the way that you're doing it as well. But I totally agree with you.
It's called prioritizing.
Yeah, that's right. But it's also about being smart about it. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I think that maybe leadership is going the wrong way or the wrong direction. And we need to wake up to it as well. Yeah.
I think about how many kids, like when my children were going through and playing sports, right? And the answer was, let everybody be on the football team. If you want to be on the we don't cut anybody from the football team because that would make them sad. And everybody gets the same size trophy so that whoever had the lowest score points versus the highest, they got the same thing. So we protected everybody's ego. How many kids that are computer programmers that we allowed to play football and they ended up getting hurt because they shouldn't have been on the field, right? Or they ended up getting their ego destroyed to the point that they have no self-confidence because they were put on a field with kids twice their size that they never got a chance to say, guess what? Some of us, right? Like I'm a big guy, but I didn't want to do sports. I didn't want to go play football. I'd much rather sit in the computer lab, right? And make things. But if I was forced to go play football because of what I looked like, then, right? How many Bill Gateses did we lose to going out and playing football, getting a broken arm, broken leg, whatever, or being average there when they could have been exceptional in a field that they didn't actually go out for?
Yeah, it's about having them in the right environment, right? But also setting them up for success, while at the same time really helping them grow and develop as individuals. You and I have been talking a little bit more.
It's the right seat on the bus, we say. Leaders have to determine the right person in the right seat on the bus.
And they need to be on the right bus. So sometimes, very good.
Absolutely.
Hey, you also talked a little bit before about AI, and that's the buzzword nowadays with technology. I find that life seems to be getting a lot faster, whether it be in business, whether it be in data. Technology seems to be driving a lot of it, or as part of the enabler. What does a leader need to do today to be successful in that fast-paced, ever-changing world?
So the key is, again, and it's to your own bandwidth and capabilities, but the answer is if there's something new out there, you need to find a group of people, other leaders like yourself, that we can leverage the knowledge everybody has, right? Most people call those masterminds. But I will tell you, the second a new technology or a new software product comes out, there's a group of like 6 of us that I'm a part of that we go and we evaluate it and then share it. And so we will send it over and go, hey, this will probably work for you. Dennis, this is probably better for you to go do this, right? A lot of us have embraced social media and we have a show. We have a whole bunch of stuff that we put out there. So we find a software program that takes long form videos, cuts it up into reels for you, and then distributes it out. Something as simple as that. One person said, hey, I found this. I like it. Check it out. And so we're not all chasing everything. It's as things come up, as technology, we all get introduced. I remember when somebody told me about Bluetooth, right? 25 years ago, when they were like, there's this thing called Bluetooth. I remember reading an article going, I wonder if I should buy stock in this company that does Bluetooth, and then didn't. But now I look and go, really, it's everywhere. And so do you have the ability to embrace the technology that's coming forth so that you can actually participate?
Yeah. But like, I wish they bought some shares in Zoom. Yeah. When the pandemic hit, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Okay, good. Some good points there. Absolutely. So I think the listeners is about being part of communities, being around the right people, a group of people that you can relate, but also can grow from as well and learn. So, which is really good. Joe, you and I have been talking about it from the leader's perspective. Let's talk about from an employee's perspective. Do you think employees' expectations of leaders have changed?
I believe employees have felt the shift to themselves being more empowered versus the leader. I believe they realize they have the ability, right, to influence a leader's actions simply by the way they're speaking to them, which used to be a good thing. We used to call that sales, right? But now I think it's used against a leader. And so if the leader isn't strong enough to stand up and do it. So I believe a lot of times when the process is correct, so when you build a process to get an outcome, right? I believe the weaker people will blame the process as opposed to where, as a leader, I will blame the process for why we have to take the actions we have to take. And so now employees can say, the process is wrong. Well, 9 out of the other 10 people are all getting the desired result through the process. And employees know now they can single out that the process is against me when in fact it isn't. It's just you not working the process.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Eh?
And I think it hurts organizations, and I think it hurts the employee ultimately because they're looking for a way out of doing something that if they did it would usually impact their life positively.
Yeah, it's actually, yeah, you're right. They're trying to get out of it. Maybe sometimes, maybe they do need to move on. Maybe there's another organization whereby, as that example you gave earlier, they went off back to the old organization. They were very happy, which is great. Good on them for being very happy. You said that when they worked with you, you helped triple their income. When they went back to their old employer, did it go back to where it was originally?
Yeah, their income went back to where it was, but they were happy, right? Because again, I used money as my motivation and thinking as soon as I got them there and invested everything I could into the person. And so you're talking hours and hours and hours of training, having them shadow, having them do this. But to them, the answer was, I really want this industry because I feel happier in this industry. And the pay wasn't the motivating factor.
Yeah, interesting. Now, if you were to get your crystal ball out here and think about the future, where do you see leadership being in 5 years?
I think we're going to be back to the harsh reality of performance-based metrics. I believe we're going to go back to the fact that this is what is expected, right? And this is what will be delivered, or we'll move on and find somebody else. I think it's just going to be that same cycle. We do this all the time, right? We go from hardcore management, it's not fair, to, oh my gosh, everybody's included. It's all nice and rainbows, except nothing happens. And then we have to find another leader to come back in and bounce back and forth.
Yeah, very good. Joe, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. Hey, if our listeners are wanting to go to get hold of you, where can they go?
thegeniuslinks.com. That'll show you sample trainings. It'll show you everything. And Dennis, for the listeners, tell them to go all the way to the bottom of the page. And there's a ghosted out bar in all the little choices they have that says secret stuff. And in there, I'll give them ebook copies. I'll give them sample trainings with actual PDFs of the trainings themselves and a lot of forms they can use to help them push their leadership forward.
There you go. There's the secret bar. Check it out. Right down towards the end of the page. Very good. Hey, Joe, once again, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. Pleasure's been mine, Dennis. Thank you. Truly an honor to be on the show.
Thank you. There you go, listeners. Well, if you're not leading yourself, you will be led. And the other thing is, are you relatable? Are you being able to make it relevant for people? Leadership is going in the wrong direction. What's your thoughts? If you're not part of a community, you're not growing from others, then you're probably going to be becoming irrelevant and being left behind. There you go, listeners. It's been a pleasure being with you. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.